Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Um, Took a little mini vacation this week. Went up to northern Utah to a little town called Midway, um, which is up in the mountains uh, near Provo and Salt Lake City, and a lovely little place. And we went up into the mountains, and uh, I, of course, grew up in northern Utah, and I started learning to identify plants in northern Utah. I took, a field botany class at the University of Utah, a class in trees and shrubs at the University of Utah, to learn how to identify plants. So we were up in the mountains, the Cascade Springs, and some other places, and stopping by the side of the road and seeing all of these plants that I grew up with, that I spent so much time when I was a teenager going out and learning to identify Engelmann aster, thimbleberry, serviceberries, twinberry honeysuckle, yellow monkey flower, just on and on and on. And it was such a reviving thing to my spirit to see all these different plants. Some of them edible, some of them medicinal, some of them poisonous, but just a lovely thing, and just so delightful to be in nature. And it made me think about, how I fell in love with herbs and with medicinal plants, with all of the amazing things that God created that are here to help us and so forth. And that also got me thinking about an issue that I've had for quite a while, with the direction that the industry as a whole has been going, which is more and more to isolated constituents of herbs, to concentrating what are so-called active ingredients from plants. And this is a trend that if you go back like into the early 1800s, there was a lot of herbal medicine in use, and there was also the pharmaceutical medicine with drugs like calomel and arsenic and that sort of thing. And they started to have understanding of chemistry and looking at the plants. And for example, they were able to extract morphine from the opium poppy, and they started playing with these new drugs that they created from plants. A lot of drugs actually were created from plants, and they basically took and found particularly alkaloids in various medicinal plants, and started creating drugs like strychnine and morphine and so forth. These drugs have a lot more side effects than the whole plant, because first of all, just from an entirely chemical perspective, a plant is a mixture of thousands and thousands of chemicals. And so you get alkaloids, which are probably kind of a byproduct of the metabolism in fast-growing plants, or other particular constituents that plants may make for whatever reason, to discourage insects or to fight infection and so forth. And you look at these and go, oh, well, these are the things that make it work, because it's easy in medicine to be reductionistic and to try to take things apart, and like taking apart a watch to try and find out what makes it tick. And so you get this movement towards the quote unquote scientific point of view. And the scientific point of view is reductionistic. And what that means is that, generally speaking, what the scientific community is doing is trying to take things apart and look at the pieces to try to figure out why something works. There's another way of looking at the world, looking at the universe, and that's holistic, seeing how something fits into the part of a greater whole, seeing the idea of synergy, that a whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. And that requires a different kind of thinking and mentality. And both are valuable. There's nothing wrong with the reductionistic thinking. There's nothing wrong with looking at at plants and trying to figure out, different constituents and what they're doing and so forth in the body. But it's looking at the body primarily as a machine. All right. Like somehow, if we could just study it enough and take it apart enough, we would be able to figure out exactly how the body works. Like you can figure out how a watch works or any other device, and reverse engineer it, and we could make living things ourselves. Nobody's been able to do that, but that's sort of the philosophy of medicine, is that that if we just could understand the chemistry well enough and understand the biological processes well enough, then we can know how to go in and tweak or fix those biological processes and so forth. I mean, that's the kind of theory of modern medicine. Well, my observation of using things like berberine or curcumin. Berberine, of course, comes from is an alkaloid that has antimicrobial properties that's found in a number of botanicals that have been historically used to fight infection and inflammation. Include coptis or Chinese golden thread. Golden seal is one of the most well-known of these. Oregon grape, there's some in barberry, and yellow root, a plant from the south. So, the berberine is obviously an important constituent in these plants because it's a constituent they all have in common. Although each one of those plants has a unique blend of other constituents as well. Or you can take curcumin from turmeric, which is widely considered to be one of the reasons why turmeric is, anti-inflammatory and helps with, so many different conditions. However, I remember hearing David Winston talk about a study that was done where they took turmeric that had the curcumin removed, and it was still anti-inflammatory. And in fact, if you look at any book, I should probably have grabbed this, but David Winston has a nice little book. Just like this one. I really like this. This is Herbal Therapy and Supplements by Marilee A. Kuhn and David Winston. And in it, it has a lot of very, very popular herbs, and it will have a list of the constituents, and it will list a lot of constituents with one particular herb and all of the different research that's been done about, some of those constituents. So it's erroneous to think that any plant owes its entire action to a particular constituent, because there are lots of active compounds in every plant we have. In fact, there are thousands. Every medicinal herb contains vitamins, contains minerals, contains fats, proteins, carbohydrates, fiber, because everything in every plant is composed, like we are, of cells. And cells have a lot of different compounds that go into making up their structures and performing their functions and so forth. So one of the things that got me into herbal medicine, I started off going out into the mountains and was studying medicinal plants, thinking of it in terms of outdoor survival and how you, what you do if modern medicine wasn't there. But I myself had a lot of personal health problems. I had chronic sinus problems. I got sick very easily. I had very poor immunity. I'd been given lots of penicillin, probably had major intestinal dysbiosis because of that. And the modern medicine wasn't getting me well. And then one day I had this thought that maybe God knew what he was doing when he put together the whole. In other words, that man's attempt to isolate and take out these chemical constituents was actually trying to improve on what God had originally created, and that maybe what God had created in the first place was better. So that's when I started dabbling in herbs and nutrition and so forth, and started to actually find answers to my own personal health problems. And I think so. I think just from the standpoint of that, a plant has numerous constituents that we don't even begin to understand how all of them interact together with the body, is one argument in favor of using whole herbs over using isolated constituents. But now I want to, talk about this a little bit more from just kind of a personal observation, a personal experience, having used these. It's not that I've taken curcumin, I've taken berberine. I've experimented with, things that are herbal concentrates and standardized extracts and that sort of thing. But I want to go, first of all, on the philosophical side, and then I want to go on the pragmatic, personal experience side. The philosophical side goes back to what my first real herb teacher, Edward Milo Millett, talked. He said that light was life, and that it was the light energy, the life energy within the plant that was primarily responsible for the healing, not the quote unquote active constituents, but if you would, the intelligence, the life force in the plant. If you ever really get deeply into studying the body, you are absolutely blown away at the intricacy, complexity, the amazing thing that our body is. It's you can write a whole, I've got a whole big thick book on just mitochondrial function, one of the tiny little sub organelles inside of our cells. Okay, the living material is infinitely complex. It is so complex that it makes stuff like the computer that I am sitting at and the camera and everything look simplistic in comparison to the complexity of the human body. Which is why I think it's nuts when people say that all of this came about with no creative intelligence, no creative power, no creator, no God, that created it, that it all happened by happenstance and circumstance. To me, that's like saying that the cell phone assembled itself by accident. It defies to me all logic that there isn't some kind of guiding intelligence at work in the universe. And that intelligence, which is the source of light and life. When I say light, I'm thinking about enlightenment, understanding, life, the ability that we have to live and experience this in life, not just in our life, but in everything. The life in all those wonderful plants I was looking at and all those interesting creatures that are living on the earth, which is so incredibly complex and so incredibly defies understanding because it's not static. There is nothing static. You can't, if you go in and you slice a chemical process in the body and you look at it, there are cycles. There are things that are happening over and over and over thousands of times per second that are propelling this life. In other words, all of the molecules and elements of our body are constantly changing. They're not static. There is nothing static in life. Life is this process of movement or motion that is moving around molecules. And I remember when Ed told me that the reason why the medicinal herbs heal more than the drugs was because they contain life. They contain light energy because they are themselves living things, and therefore they have the capability of supporting and healing the life process. Not just the chemistry, not just the constituents, but the actual living movement of the light energy. And I remember I went out and I went to the park and I sat there and I thought about the grass, that it was just sitting in front of me, and that the sunshine coming down and the grass literally capturing those photons. All right. And then grabbing elements from the air, grabbing elements from the soil and the water, and assembling them into a form, okay, using that light as the source of energy for the entire process. Now, light being the energy that enlivened the grass and allowed it to grow. And I thought of the time-lapse photographs that you see of plants growing, and it's like a dance unfolding. Ed had had this spiritual experience in which he had kind of seen this, and he tried to relate it to me, and it was difficult to understand, but I had to go out and ponder it. But like the DNA were like tiny little tuning forks that were literally vibrating and creating an energy, a field, a matrix, okay? A matrix, if you will, to which the elements came and participated in the dance. Like if you've ever seen the picture of dancers, with the aerial camera, and as they move in unison, it looks like maybe a flower blooming or something like that. The elements all participating in this dance, this energy. And the energy is the life, not the chemistry. It is the life that animates the chemistry, not the chemistry creating the life. That's what I came to conclude. The life animates the chemistry. It takes the dust of the earth, the raw elements of the earth, and it brings them to life. This life energy that comes from the Creator. And so I began to understand that it wasn't just the chemistry in the plants that did the healing. It was the life process, the life energy within the plant that did the healing. That the plant has its own living energy matrix, and that energy of the plant actually helps tune up the energy of the body. So it is not just supplying chemical elements. And that is something I haven't talked about a lot, but just being out in nature, it reminded me of this, seeing all the diversity of life and the wonderful, amazing living things and what's going on. It reminded me of this fact. And I believe that the more we take a food or a medicine in the form of a whole herb, and we tamper with it, the more we denature it, we devitalize it. And that whole idea of denaturing it and devitalizing means that even though we may be getting the chemicals, we are somehow taking out the life. We're making it more dead. And that dead material does not as readily participate in the dance of life as the material that's already been imbued with the light or the life energy, like a plant. Which is why I have always preferred the idea of trying to heal with plants over maybe isolated vitamin and mineral supplements. And even though I think a lot of this stuff is useful and I use it, I still keep coming back to plants. Now, in my own observation, this is what I've really noticed, that all isolated chemicals, which includes isolated vitamins and minerals, which includes, isolated plant constituents like curcumin and turmeric and that sort of thing, all have a very strong medicinal action, drug-like action, meaning that they will make things change that you can readily see. And people like that because they like to see something that, I can tell a difference quickly. That's our whole society, our whole philosophy. We want to see a really rapid change or improvement. But all of this happens because the body is being kind of pushed or forced in a particular direction. Whereas my observation of herbs is herbs are more healing. And what do we mean by healing? That drug-like action only works while you're taking the supplement. And what I've also observed is over time, the body starts to build a resistance to it. It starts to figure out how to break down that chemical faster. It makes more enzymes to break down that constituent, to blah, 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 because it's pushing against the normal balance of the body, and the body, fights back. It's sort of like caffeine. Caffeine blocks. Caffeine is a really good example of my understanding of how a lot of this works. Caffeine attaches to adenosine receptors in your brain, which tell you that you're sleepy, and it blocks them. And so what it does is it blocks the signal that your body needs to sleep. It doesn't give you energy. No. So what happens is in response, your body is now stressed. It wants sleep, can't have sleep. So it initiates a stress reaction, an adrenaline rush, cortisol, more cortisol, more epinephrine or norepinephrine gets released, and you're temporarily excited. Your body is excited, and you feel like it's giving you energy, but all it's done is stimulate you a little bit and block the message that you're tired. And of course, the body knows it needs sleep, and so it tries to bypass that by building more adenosine receptors to get the message through your sleep. So you either wind up having to have coffee every day in order just to feel normal, or you wind up taking more and more caffeine to try to get that energy rush, and then eventually, that starts backfiring. Whereas James Duke, who was in the Department of Agriculture and a big friend of herbal medicine, has a belief that I do, that the body, in the huge complexity of constituents in a plant, that the body can pick and choose. I need this chemical, I need that chemical, I need that chemical, out of all of the soup of ingredients, and use it to help try to balance out its function. So in a pragmatic sense, I've observed that herbs are more healing in that they return the body to a normal state, particularly the more tonic herbs, return the body to a more normal state where you don't need them anymore. In other words, unlike caffeine, which you have to take more and more of it to get the effect, you wind up not having to take it at all because the body actually reinforces. In other words, it restores normal balance, and that's been my experience. If I want a quick stabilizing influence, I'll use the vitamins, the minerals, the isolated things that you find in food. But when I want to actually help the body normalize, it's herbs that really have the capability of helping the body to return to normal state. Because generally speaking, when I find the right herbs to help someone, they may take them for a month, 2 or 3 months, maybe even if the problem's really severe, 6 months, but they stop needing them. I stop needing them. Every herbal formula I've ever found that was really useful, I'll take it for a while and then I don't need it anymore. I can tell my body doesn't need it anymore. And maybe I'll go for 6 months or 12 months and I don't need it. And then maybe because I start to gradually shift out of balance, I need to take it again. But you don't have to take it all the time. Like a high blood pressure medication, you have to take all the time. Okay. Whereas you get the right herbs and your blood pressure comes down and it normalizes, and you don't even need the herbs to do it anymore. That's what I mean. So the whole thing is about balance. So I've seen some comments on the chat. So let's get into some of the comments on the chat. Someone says, is there a non-addictive herbs that relieves pain? I've had morphine and it removes pain. It was replaced by another pain reliever that messed my brain in a bad way. Well, let's talk about just pain in general, because that's a really good question. And it relates really well to what I'm talking about. Okay, so what happens with most pain medication, like the morphine or whatever, is it's working on blocking pain messages. In other words, the pain occurs because something is wrong in a particular part of the body. And the body, through the nervous system, sends signals to the brain saying, we've got a problem here. I call it the 911 call. The 911 call, help, emergency. We've got a problem. We've got injured, damaged tissues here. We've got something that isn't working right. And we need to get your attention that there's a problem here. Painkillers are like cutting the wires on the 911 call. It it doesn't fix. The reason why the painkillers don't work very well is because all they're doing is blocking the message that something's wrong. They're not fixing anything. They're not fixing the problem that the body is trying to get your attention to. They're just blocking the signal that something's wrong. So yeah, there are herbs that are pain relievers that can help to calm down those pain signals and so forth. And like for example, a couple of one of them that have an action that's milder but similar to the morphine are California poppy, which is a very gentle remedy, and corydalis, which actually has a very similar action to the opioids. It's actually a very mild opioid used in Chinese medicine for pain, but it's a whole herb. It also helps to move blood and qi and relieve some of the underlying causes of the pain. And I've used corydalis to help wean people off of those kinds of pain medications by taking something in the herb kingdom that has a kind of a similar function and replacing it. But I never do that without trying to understand what's the injury, what's the problem, what the area of the body that's signaling that it's hurt, what is going on, and how can I fix it? Because otherwise, I'm putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound, and it's not going to be a permanent fix. I have to get in there and figure out what's causing the pain, what's the source of the pain. And there are a lot of herbs that actually help to heal the tissues that are damaged, thereby relieving the pain. And turmeric is one of those. Turmeric, one of the things that happens a lot in modern society is that, and I explain this in my Fundamentals of Natural Healing course. If you really want to understand this in great detail, take my Fundamentals of Natural Healing course. And it starts off with explaining injury and inflammation and then how that relates to acute disease. Now I'm in the, starting the module this week on chronic illness. And then the fourth module will be in the mental and emotional component. But I explain this whole underlying process. When tissues get damaged, they respond with an inflammatory process. There are 4 things involved in the inflammatory process: heat, swelling, redness, and fourth one, pain. Okay, so pain is always a signal that tissues are inflamed, which means that something is irritated or damaged the tissues. So the pain is telling you there's a problem. The swelling sequesters the area. The redness is due to the sequestering process and the collection of red blood cells in the area, and the heat actually comes from an oxidative process taking place at the site of injury. What's supposed to happen is the inflammation at some point serves the purpose to draw in white blood cells, cause the body to look at this thing, and then there's a cascade of chemicals that occur to stop the inflammatory process, reverse it, and begin a healing process. And that healing process often isn't taking place in modern society because we lack the nutrients to initiate the healing process. We're so nutritionally deficient, or either we lack the nutrients to initiate the healing process, or the other thing is the irritation is ongoing. Perhaps the damage is being done by a chemical, so exposure to heavy metal or a bunch of toxic pesticides or food additives or other chemicals that are present in the body that are continually irritating the tissues that have got to be cleaned out and eliminated, both from the person's environment and also from the person's body. On the nutrient side, the deficiency of omega-3 essential fatty acids is one of the things that creates chronic inflammation, because chronic inflammation is involved in any kind of chronic pain. And the chemical messengers that initiate the healing process and help to repair the tissues are all dependent on omega-3 essential fatty acids. Well, if you have high amounts of omega-6 essential fatty acids, which most people do, and low amounts of omega-3 essential fatty acids, your body can initiate an inflammatory response, but it can't reverse it. And so this is one of the reasons why omega-3 essential fatty acids are really good at calming things down. Turmeric that I mentioned earlier is really good anti-inflammatory, but it's also a tissue healer. A lot of these herbs that we think of as anti-inflammatories or antioxidants are actually have a variety of constituents that go in and aid the healing process, give the body the tools it needs to reverse the inflammatory process and start helping the tissues to heal. And that's the ultimate answer to the pain. And so there's no one particular herb that I would recommend wholesale because treating pain is treating a symptom. What we need to do is you need to take a look at the person's diet, lifestyle, what's going on, try to figure out what's causing the damage, and then fix it. And then the pain goes away and it never comes back. And that's what whole herbs and whole foods and whole nutrients do really well, is giving the body what it needs to fix itself. So the problem is reversed and it goes away completely. Now, someone mentioned that coffee puts them to sleep. And I have a webinar coming up later this month, and I think I just pop up here. Did I? No, I didn't. I didn't put a link in for it. I meant to, but you go to treelight.com. I'm doing a webinar on explaining why some people appear to react backwards to nerving agents, meaning that caffeine makes them sleepy, or stuff that stimulates most people makes them feel sleepy. And often some of the herbs that help relax other people will make them feel more stimulated. I have a very close friend who has adult ADHD, or had it, and she's kind of, it was her and I, Kimberly Ballas, who's also my business partner in our Nature Sunshine business. She and I figured out this whole mystery of nervous system balance, because she was someone who coffee helped her relax and lavender made her anxious and nervous and hyper. And I first encountered this dilemma in the late 80s when two friends of mine put together two products based on colloidal minerals and essential oils. And so they used glycerin to help mix the essential oils in with colloidal minerals. And they created two products, one called Aromin Day and the other one Aromin Night. And I took them, I really liked them. Took the Aromin Day in the morning, gave me energy, took the Aromin Night at the evening, helped me go to sleep. So this was actually an internal use of essential oils that I was playing with my friends way back in the 80s, long before Young Living, doTERRA, all these companies came on the scene. One of my close friends was really big into essential oils and learned a lot about essential oils from him. And he, anyway, so what we encountered though is 10%, approximately 10%, 1 out of 10 people who tried these products found that they had the opposite reaction, that the Aromin Day made them sleepy and the Aromin Night stimulated them. And so that was my first experience with encountering where people seem to react backwards to nervines. And it really bothered me because that was, it's like, why would it, Cascara sagrada never causes constipation. So I couldn't figure out why herbs would appear to do the reverse with the nervous system and not act the same all the time. So later on, we were making glycerin extracts, and one of the extracts we were making was Chinese ephedra. And one of our customers said they were using the glycerin extract of Chinese ephedra for their ADHD son in place of Ritalin. It was working really, really well. So here we have again a stimulant acting as a sedative in certain kids. Well, when I finally figured this out with the help of my business partner, I came to realize that it's in the balance of the nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So I am actually teaching a whole class on this later this month. You go to treelight.com, look under classes. It's called Balancing the Nervous System. I meant to put the link up here, and I forgot. But if it's $20 if you pre-register before the July 25th, and I'll explain this whole thing. I'll explain how you use the iris and other symptoms to tell whether a person's sympathetic or parasympathetic dominant, how you what remedies act as sympathetic stimulants and sympathetic sedatives, what remedies act as parasympathetic stimulants and parasympathetic sedatives, and so on and so forth, and how you go about balancing the nervous system with herbs and nutrients and so forth. The herb that I use, I use different herbs to get people off pain medication depending on what kinds of pain medication they are using. If they're using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs that are like over-the-counter, then I immediately try to get them on things like turmeric or curcumin, or I really love this Nature Sunshine formula called IF Relief that has boswellia and willow bark and turmeric in it, and is a fantastic. I mean, I just had just as an example, I just had a tooth pulled. I had a tooth that had gotten, it had previously had a root canal. It had gotten a cavity basically at the gum line, and it just was not worth trying to save it. So I had it pulled, and I had another tooth pulled back here because it got damaged and for another reason. But anyway, in both instances, I took this Nature Sunshine formula IF Relief, which has a lot of anti-inflammatory herbs that promote a healing process, and it rapidly took down the inflammation, the swelling, caused it to heal really rapidly. I've used it before for similar things, like my office manager had to have some teeth pulled and some serious dental work. And for like 3 or 4 days, she was just swollen up and in pain and everything. And she was taking pain medications. And I had her take the IF Relief with the anti-inflammatory herbs instead. And the pain went down within 24 hours. The thing started to heal and so forth. So in other words, the herbs actually started to reverse the injury and cause it to heal. So whenever people are talking about like injury, surgery, that sort of thing, I really use those kind of herbs. But if someone's been taking morphine or any kind of opioid drug, and there's a huge problem with opioid addiction. I mean, in this country, people get on opioids for various reasons, and then they become addicted to them because they're very, very addictive. And so, in fact, the person who invented morphine, who basically extracted the alkaloids from the opium poppy and created what we call heroin and as an injectable substance. And his wife became the first heroin addict. All right, because this is highly addictive. So I use Coriodalis because Coriodalis has a similar mechanism of action. So it's attaching to the same receptor sites, thereby helping to calm down and help wean the person off of the opioids. And it's spelled C-O-R. Wait a minute, let me type it in. I'll just type it in the chat. So if you know any of you, I keep Coriodalis at the office. So if any of you want to try some, you can order it from me, or there's a couple of companies that sell it. Yeah. So just said, if the pain is from surgery, then attack pain and accompanying inflammation. But you're not attacking the pain. You're giving the body tools to help reverse the injury and the inflammation, and that's what the things like boswellia and turmeric and also herbs that are traditional, what we call vulneraries, do really, really well. Comfrey, which is another herb we lost, was a fantastic tissue healer. You can still apply it topically. someone says APS2, which is willow bark, capsicum, and wild lettuce formula from NSP helps. Yeah, so you use these herbs in place of the medications to wean people off of medications, but you are trying to help get whatever the body needs to heal from the tissue damage that's involved. Now, someone asked about herbs for high blood pressure. So this is another really good example of what I try to explain to people. And my comprehensive guide to nature essential products is out of print. It'll be replaced by a book, and I haven't decided the title yet, but it's a guide to natural healing that will refer to single herbs, single essential soils, and so forth, and types of formulas. And then I'll have separate information available on our website so you can download formulas from different companies that would fit those categories. But until that happens, just refer to what I wrote about high blood pressure. High blood pressure is a symptom. High blood pressure is not a disease. It is a symptom. A symptom of what is the question. Now, in many cases, doctors know the cause of what's causing a particular problem, high blood pressure, but then there's a whole bunch of cases which they don't know the cause. Those cases are basically what they call essential hypertension. But basically it means we don't know what's causing it. So all we're going to do is we're going to use something that goes in and stimulates the body to relax the blood vessels and open them up. But just like caffeine, the problem is that it's fighting whatever the body is trying to do. The blood pressure is elevated because there's a lack of peripheral circulation. In other words, the blood isn't getting into the little microcapillaries in the extremities of the body. They're sending signals to the brain. The brain is then having the heart exert and the circulatory system exert more pressure in order to compensate for the problem, in order to try to get the blood to the extremities. So you have to figure out what is causing this problem. A lot of it has to do with damage to what's called the endothelial lining, which is there's a 1 cell thick lining on your arteries that is basically like a little coating on the outlying pipe, and that endothelial, its function is to modulate the size of the blood vessel to help when the body needs more blood, it dilates. When it needs less, it constricts, and it does this through a little chemical messenger called nitric oxide. So let me just give you some basic things that are things that you look at with high blood pressure. The first is inflammation. When that endothelial lining is inflamed, yet it doesn't function properly, your blood vessels are more constricted. That's also what causes plaque to develop, and it causes the blood pressure to increase. If that gets damaged, then your body will try to patch it with a mixture of cholesterol and fat and calcium and so forth. We call that arterial plaque. And that will cause the blood vessel to lose flexibility, which then increases pressure. So taking down the inflammation in the blood vessels is critical to helping to reduce the blood pressure. That's why a lot of people find that omega-3 essential fatty acids or other antioxidant, anti-inflammatory supplements will help. So that's one thing. The other thing is that magnesium causes muscle dilation and calcium causes muscle constriction. So about 70 to 90% of the population is deficient in magnesium. So one of the simplest things to try with high blood pressure is magnesium. Magnesium works very similar to a drug called beta blockers. Beta blockers not beta blockers, calcium channel blockers. So the calcium ions flow into a muscle to cause it to contract. The magnesium ions flow in to cause it to relax. calcium channel blockers block the calcium from moving into the muscle to make it contract. But all you need to do in that case, in most of the time, is take more magnesium. You get more magnesium, less calcium, more magnesium, and then your blood vessels are more relaxed. That also helps your heart. Plus, magnesium helps is used in the mitochondria to generate energy, helps you sleep better. So that's one of the first things. Those are two of the first things I look at with someone who has high blood pressure. Is one is inflammation, and what do I need to do to bring down chronic inflammation? Number two is magnesium deficiency. Another thing that really is important is your fat-soluble vitamins, because your fat-soluble vitamins are part of that process of preventing fats from oxidizing. And most people are deficient in vitamin D3, in vitamin E, in vitamin A, and they actually need good fats. They need fats that are rich in fat-soluble vitamins, which grass-fed butter is one example of that is really helpful. I eat grass-fed butter all the time. And they can take those as supplements, right? And then another thing that you can look at is just things that directly affect the nitric oxide. A really simple one is linden flower, which is really relaxing. But anyways, I'm saying there's a variety of herbs and things that you can try, but depends on the person. You have to look at the individual person, the individual case, and figure out what is the appropriate thing. But I really do, think that most high blood pressure is actually very curable if you get the right nutrients in there to heal that endothelial lining. And so, someone also mentions another nutrient, a lack of chromium. Okay, chromium is a trace mineral that a lot of people are deficient in, that's involved in blood sugar regulation. And one of the big things that causes inflammation, all right, is high insulin levels. So as your body develops insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, because you've eaten a whole bunch of refined carbohydrates that don't have any chromium and B vitamins and other nutrients in them over the years, your cells start becoming resistant to the influence of insulin, and your blood sugar starts to climb, and sugar is pro-inflammatory. So the more sugar you eat, the more inflamed your body will be, including your blood vessels that are carrying that sugar. Alcohol also, by the way, damages the peripheral circulation and increases blood pressure. So there's another one. But sugar. So if you can balance the blood sugar and get the person's sugar and insulin levels down, that also is another thing that will bring down the high blood pressure. So I've also found that just helping people relax brings down blood pressure, because there's an emotional component to things as well. And here's an interesting fact I've observed in emotional healing work. All right. When we are happy, all right, when we feel good, when we're in love, there is a dilation of our blood vessels that opens us up, and we feel open to life, and we feel relaxed, and we feel happy, and that opens the peripheral circulation. And that's why a person who's in love and happy, their eyes sparkle, their skin glows, they are warm. All right. When I go into shock, because I get some difficult thing that breaks my heart or causes me pain or whatever, I have the opposite reaction. My peripheral blood vessels constrict, right? Close down, tighten up. The blood rushes inward. It swells into my chest, causes pain. We call it heartache. I hurt in here. And I also become pale and clammy and peripheral circulation cold. All right. And the grieving process the process of sobbing and breaking down and crying and wailing and just in pain, actually is a process that forces a redilation of the blood vessels and opens up the peripheral circulation. And just something as simple as sighing, I've done this in emotional healing classes, and people's hands suddenly become warmer. Their skin color looks better as they let go, as they go through a mini grieving process. It opens you back up again. So part of this is emotional. So that's why the way I work is I don't attack symptoms. I look at people. I try to understand health and what goes on, and try to custom tailor the therapy to the person. And so, like chromium, which is involved in blood sugar, can help to overcome insulin resistance, help balance out the blood sugar, bring down the insulin levels, and that can also help high blood sugar. Plus, chromium is one of the minerals that helps create flexibility in tissues along with copper, but most people aren't deficient in copper. Someone said they found that with a broken heart, herbs like HSC, which is nervous fatigue formula in the United States, and ADC, which is mood elevator in the United States, are really good at helping heal a broken heart. And yes, they are. Particularly, I find the HSC or nervous fatigue formula is very helpful for people who have all that pressure and so forth in their chest. I also use flower essences for that, which reminds me, I did get the thing up. If any of you have tonight starts my emotional healing module 3, which is completely free. This is I just put up the link. I am just putting up the link to if you want to sign up for that, you just can click on that link and it'll sign you up. And this particular emotional healing module, I am going to spend 2 sessions on flower essences and 2 sessions on essential oils for emotional healing. The other 4 sessions, I'm going to talk about breathing and movement patterns for releasing trapped emotions. I'm going to talk about my system of emotional anatomy. I'm going to talk about the question affirmation technique, which is one of the most powerful tools for emotional healing I know, and also about healing rituals, symbolic journeys, and mental tools, which are really very powerful but very strange tools. So if you like to sign up for that, you don't have, just like this, you don't have to actually be able to attend a live session. You sign up, you get sent the link to watch the recording afterwards. Plus I post them on YouTube, and you can also sign up for the online class and get handouts and materials that way too. Let's come back to the chat. Yeah, and by the way, I'm very excited about this module. The first 2 modules are very, they're much more getting into the background of the theory and the spiritual principles behind this. In this module, I get into some really, really practical stuff of what you can do to help people heal emotionally. All right, let's see. Are there any other questions here that by the way, wild lettuce is a mild opiate. However, it becomes very inert when it dries. So if you want to use wild lettuce for pain, the best way to do that is to go grab the fresh leaves and shove them in a blender, either with glycerin or alcohol, and you want a pretty strong, like Everclear alcohol, because you're going to get a lot of juice out of the plant. and a lot of water out of the plant. So you don't want to use something like brandy that's only like 40% alcohol. You want something that's like 60 or 70% alcohol or higher. I usually just use a little Everclear, and you put it in there and blend it up and then strain it out so that you get the opioid compounds suspended fresh. And then you can actually take that, and I've actually found that does work very well as another mild opiate thing in addition to Cordialis. But the dried stuff doesn't really work as much. Okay, okay. Now on the emotional healing certification, okay, if I signed up for the first module, attended all, but cannot access it on the class page anymore. If you will send me an email at webinars@treelight.com, that's here, I'll type that in. If you're having trouble, with any class, just email me at that email address or call our toll-free number, which is in the afternoons, because David usually doesn't get here till the afternoon. You can, we'll help you get on the class pages for the emotional healing thing. I will probably do a even more advanced training on flower essences and emotional oils after I get done with this initial 2018 emotional healing class. I'm working on what's going to be required for certification in the future. My problem with the certification program I set up before is this. To certify someone in emotional healing, I realized that we have to work with a person until I actually feel comfortable that they really understand the process and are good at doing it. So I've been trying to figure out how to handle that, because someone could go through and answer all the questions right and come to the workshop and still not be a person that I would feel comfortable saying, here's your, I ran into this with situation, and it's when I decided I got to back off of this and rethink this. So I am coming up with a way for people to get emotionally certified in emotional healing, and they will be required to attend the classes, but you will have to come to live workshops or work with me one-on-one through a tutoring process in order to get certified, but I haven't got that all figured out. And yes, the emotional class is recorded, so if you register for it, you'll get the link for it. Oh, that's an interesting idea. We used to have a duplicator for DVDs and CDs, but it needs repair, and we haven't been actually doing DVDs or whatever. But if we got it going again, we could actually start putting out classes on DVDs. I just have to think about that for the future, but it's a good suggestion. And we're about out of time, but someone asked about the philosophy of squaring your breath, and I'll go into in one of the modules of the free class. I'll talk extensively about breath and breathing patterns. Every emotion has a breathing pattern, and it has to do with cycles. Okay, so there's like an inhalation and exhalation. There's also like the lungs being full of air, the lungs being empty of air. So your normal breathing pattern, is, and then there's a pause, and then you inhale again. Okay, those four parts of the breath, the inhalation, the pause at the top, the exhalation, the pause at the bottom, are actually relate to the whole concept of like the four elements. They're four different energies. And when you make them all even, what I call squaring your breath, so that the inhalation, the pause at the top, the exhalation, and the pause at the bottom are all the same, you center your emotions. You put yourself in a centered emotional place, so that you are not, whereas every other breathing pattern, anger, anxiety, etc., is different from that. One of those things is longer, another part's shorter, and that distortion of the cycle of the breath, that it's not even, actually is what the main thing that's actually generating that emotional response. So you can deliberately take control of your emotional state through breath work. And you can also release grief or get a person in touch with their anger or anything else like that by having them adopt the appropriate breathing pattern for that. And again, that's all part of tonight's emotional healing module. Well, thanks everybody for participating. It's 11 o'clock, so I'm trying to hold these down to exactly an hour. 2 weeks again, we'll meet again. I hope you enjoyed the information today, and I hope you'll enjoy some of the classes that we're offering. Like I mentioned, the Emotional Healing Module 3 starts tonight. The Fundamentals of Natural Healing Module 3, I think the second lesson is this Thursday. And August 1st, we're doing the class on balancing the nervous system, which I explain all about autonomic nervous system balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So until next time, thanks for joining me, and hope you have a great day.